In the heart of the wild, the truest treasures are not buried in the earth, but are found in the bonds we forge in the face of despair. Through the frosted glass of her cabin window, Amelia watched the first snow of the season blanket the Rocky Mountains. This was her 5th winter in solitude, a silence that became her only companion after her younger brother Leo vanished, seeking his fortune. But this morning, the quiet was broken. A bay horse, dark with a wound on its flank, staggered from the tree line. Its expensive leather saddle was twisted, its gait unsteady. The animal collapsed near her porch, its breath pluming in the frigid air. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, pierced the fragile peace of her world. The silence she had cultivated for years was now shattered by this omen of disaster. Amelia moved cautiously from the warmth of her cabin, her worn boots crunching on the fresh snow. The horse lay still, its sides heaving. She ran a gentle hand over its neck, murmuring soft words of comfort. Her gaze fell upon the saddle horn, where a small, crudely carved wooden amulet was tied with a leather thong. It was a falcon, wings outstretched, her breath caught in her throat, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. This was their secret, a symbol she and Leo had created as children. It was a silent promise, a call for help that only she would understand. The world around her seemed to fade into a blur of white and gray. He had sworn he would only send it if he faced a danger he could not overcome alone. The wooden falcon felt heavy in her palm, a tangible link to a brother she had long feared was lost forever. The grief she had buried deep within her rose to the surface, but it was mingled with a fierce, protective anger. Her quiet life of trapping and solitude was a fortress she had built against the pain of his absence. Now its walls had crumbled. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she could not ignore this desperate plea. Her brother was out there, and he needed her. The time for hiding was over. Without a second thought, she turned back to the cabin. Inside she moved with purpose, strapping on a belt with a skinning knife and a pouch of supplies. She took her father's old hunting rifle from its place above the hearth, its familiar weight, a small comfort in her hands. She did not pack much, only what was necessary for a hard journey. Stepping back out into the biting wind, she gave the wounded horse a final, sorrowful look. Then, with her jaw set in grim determination, she followed the dark trail the animal had left in the snow, a path leading her away from her sanctuary and into the heart of an unknown peril. The trail led Amelia through dense pine forests and across frozen streams, a crimson thread woven into the pristine white landscape. She moved with the silent grace of a predator, her senses alive to every snap of a twig, every whisper of the wind. Years of living in the wilderness had sharpened her instincts, teaching her to read the subtle language of the land. The forest was not just a place of beauty, but one of unforgiving truths. She knew that out here, a single mistake could be your last. Her focus was absolute, her mind clear of everything but the path ahead and the brother she was determined to find. After hours of tracking, the trail brought her to the foothills of Black Mountain, to an old, abandoned prospector's camp. The sight sent a shiver down her spine. Tattered canvas tents flapped in the wind like ghosts, and rusted tools lay half buried in the snow. Here the horse's tracks mingled with the deep imprints of men's boots. This was not the work of a wild animal. This was the result of human greed. She saw the signs of a struggle near a collapsed mine shaft, an overturned cart, scattered supplies, and the dark, unmistakable stains that marred the snow. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Fear was a cold hand gripping her soul, but a stronger emotion pushed it aside. Resolve. She would not turn back. She would not let her brother's fate remain a mystery. She scanned the desolate camp, her eyes searching for any clue, any sign of where he might have been taken. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the camp, carrying with it a sense of profound loss. It was a place where dreams had come to die, and she prayed that Leo's had not met the same end. Her gaze settled on a dilapidated shack at the edge of the clearing, its door slightly ajar. From within she heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound. It was the sound of a low moan, a whisper of pain carried on the wind. Amelia raised her rifle, her knuckles white as she gripped the cold wood. She approached the shack with the stealth of a mountain cat, her boots making no sound on the snow. Every nerve in her body was taut, ready for whatever lay beyond the splintered door. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, and pushed the door open with the barrel of her rifle. The darkness inside was thick and heavy, and it took a moment for her eyes to adjust. Then she saw him, a figure slumped on the floor in the far corner, his life slowly ebbing away. In the dim light of the shack, she saw a man lying on the dirt floor. His buckskin clothing was torn, and a dark stain spread from a wound on his shoulder. He was a young Arapaho man, his long, dark hair braided, his features sharp and proud even in his weakened state. He was barely conscious, yet his eyes, when they flickered open, held a spark of unyielding spirit. He saw her standing there, a silhouette against the bright snow, and tried to push himself up, a gasp of pain escaping his lips. His gaze was unfocused, his body trembling with the effort to speak. He was a stranger, yet something about him felt familiar. "The water, the river, it keeps its promises," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp, before his eyes closed and his head fell back against the rough wall. Amelia froze, the words echoing in the sudden silence of the shack. "The river keeps its promises." It was a childish oath, a secret phrase she and Leo had sworn to each other years ago, a promise to always find one another, no matter what. No one else could know those words. She lowered her rifle, her mind reeling. This man was not her enemy. He was a messenger, a living link to the brother she had thought was gone forever. She knelt beside him, her earlier caution replaced by a sense of urgency. She had to save him. He was her only connection to Leo, her only hope of finding out what had happened. She gently examined his wound, a deep gash that looked days old and badly infected. He was burning with fever, his skin hot to the touch. As she moved to make him more comfortable, she noticed his hand was clenched into a tight fist. With gentle but firm pressure, she pried his fingers open. Tucked inside his palm was a small, folded piece of yellowed parchment. It was a fragment of a map, its lines drawn in faded ink. There was no doubt in her mind now. This man, this stranger from a different world, held the key to her brother's fate, the map fragment, the secret phrase, the wounded horse with the falcon amulet. It was all part of a puzzle she was just beginning to piece together. A story of partnership, of trust, and of a betrayal so deep it had nearly cost this man his life. She looked at his face, now peaceful in unconsciousness, and felt a strange sense of kinship. He was a warrior, a survivor, and she knew in that moment that their paths were now intertwined. She would not let him die. Overcoming her hesitation, Amelia knew she could not leave him to perish in the cold. She fashioned a travois from fallen branches and her rope, a crude but effective sled to carry his weight. The journey back to her cabin was an arduous ordeal. She pulled with all her strength, her muscles screaming in protest, her breath coming in ragged clouds. The unconscious man was a heavy burden, but she refused to give up. With every step, she was not just saving a stranger. She was fighting for the last piece of her family, for the hope that Leo might still be alive somewhere. The wilderness tested her, but her will was unbreakable. Once back in the warmth of her cabin, she laid him on her cot by the fire. She worked quickly, her hands steady. She cleaned his wound not with whiskey or fire, but with a remedy passed down from her grandmother, a skilled herbalist. She created a poultice of crushed yarrow leaves and pine resin, a fragrant mixture known for its power to draw out infection and close wounds. As she tended to him, she felt a flicker of something she had not felt in years, a connection to another person. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a healer, a protector. While he lay in a feverish sleep, she carefully searched his belongings, hoping for another clue. Tucked inside his belt, she found a second piece of the map. It was drawn on the same type of parchment, with the same faded ink. Her hands trembled as she retrieved the fragment Leo had left with her before he departed, a piece she had kept hidden in an old wooden box. She laid the 3 pieces together on the table. They fit perfectly, forming a complete map that pointed to a hidden waterfall deep within the mountains, a place marked with a single, cryptic symbol. For days, he drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in the delirium of fever. Amelia sat by his side, bathing his brow with cool water and forcing sips of willow bark tea between his lips. In those long, quiet hours, a silent bond formed between them. It was not love, not yet, but a profound respect born from shared adversity. She saw the strength in his face, the resilience in his spirit. He, in his brief moments of clarity, saw the kindness in her eyes, the gentle determination in her touch. They were two solitary souls, brought together by tragedy, finding an unexpected comfort in each other's presence. When the fever finally broke, the Arapaho man, who introduced himself as Nocona, awoke with clear eyes. His voice was weak, but his words were a torrent, a story of friendship and betrayal that made Amelia's blood run cold. He and Leo had been partners, drawn together by a shared dream of a life beyond the confines of their worlds. Together they had discovered a rich vein of gold, the very location marked on the map. It was a discovery that should have secured their futures, but instead it had sealed Leo's fate. Their trust had been their undoing. Their third partner was a man named Bartholomew Higgins, a man whose smile hid a heart full of greed. Higgins wanted the entire claim for himself. He saw Leo and Nocona not as partners, but as obstacles. He waited for the moment they had gathered a significant amount of gold, and then he struck, his treachery as swift and deadly as a rattlesnake. In the ensuing conflict, Leo had fallen, sacrificing himself to give Nocona a chance to escape. Nocona's voice cracked as he recounted his friend's final moments, the memory still raw and painful. But Higgins's cruelty did not end there. Before he died, Leo confessed his greatest secret to Nocona, a secret he had kept hidden to protect the innocent. He had a young daughter named Lily, a child born from a love that society would not accept. Leo had placed her with a trusted family in a nearby settlement, hoping to bring her to a new home once he had made his fortune. Higgins, in his insatiable greed, had learned of the child's existence. He saw her not as a person, but as leverage, a tool for his wicked plans. Higgins was now holding Lily hostage at his fortified ranch, a fortress built on stolen gold and fear. He had sent a message to Nocona, a cruel ultimatum, the map in exchange for the girl's life. For Amelia, the revelation was a staggering blow. A niece she never knew existed, the last living piece of her brother, was in the hands of his killer. The gold meant nothing to her now. The quiet grief she had harbored for years transformed into a burning, righteous fury. She looked at Nocona, and in his eyes, she saw the same fire. They had a new purpose. They would save the child. As Nocona regained his strength, the small cabin became a space of shared purpose and growing intimacy. He told Amelia stories of his travels with Leo, painting a portrait of a brother she had missed desperately. Leo, he said, spoke of her constantly, his voice filled with admiration for her courage and independent spirit. He had described her as the strongest person he knew, a woman who had carved her own path in a world that tried to force her into a mold. Hearing this from a stranger brought tears to Amelia's eyes, healing a part of her heart she thought was forever broken. Nocona then made a confession that deepened their bond. After Leo's disappearance, driven by his promise to his friend, he had traveled to the mountains. For months, he had watched over Amelia from a distance, a silent guardian she never knew she had. He had not approached her, fearing that his presence would draw the attention of Higgins and put her in danger. He had respected her solitude, even as he yearned to tell her the truth. His words were a balm to her lonely soul, a revelation that she had not been truly alone after all. Their evenings were spent by the warmth of the fire, the flickering light casting long shadows on the log walls. They spoke of their pasts, of the worlds they came from, and the dreams they held for the future. Amelia spoke of her quiet life, of the simple joys she found in the wilderness. Nocona spoke of his people, of their traditions and their deep connection to the land. In their shared stories, they found common ground, a bridge between their two very different cultures. The walls she had built around her heart began to crumble, replaced by a foundation of trust and affection. She felt herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, and the gentle sadness in his eyes. He, in turn, was captivated by her fierce spirit, her compassionate heart, and the resilience that shone through her grief. One evening as they sat in comfortable silence, he reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent a jolt through her, a warmth that spread through her entire body. It was a moment of pure, unspoken connection, the blossoming of a love that was as wild and beautiful as the mountains around them. Their shared grief and burgeoning feelings forged a powerful alliance. They knew they could not storm Higgins's ranch with force. They had to rely on their wits. Their goal was singular and pure: to rescue Lily. The gold held no allure for them. They spent days poring over the map, not for its treasure, but for its knowledge of the terrain. Amelia, with her intimate understanding of the mountains, pointed out hidden game trails and steep ravines. Nocona, with his skills as a tracker, devised a path that would keep them hidden from prying eyes. Their plan was a tapestry woven from her knowledge and his experience. Their journey toward the ranch at Snake Creek was fraught with tension. They moved through the wilderness like ghosts, their senses on high alert. One afternoon, they spotted one of Higgins's men, a brutish hired hand named Gus, patrolling a narrow canyon pass. He was a formidable obstacle, a man who lived by the rule of the strong. A direct confrontation would be foolish and dangerous. They needed to neutralize him without a fight, to use the land itself as their weapon. Nocona's eyes scanned the canyon walls, a thoughtful expression on his face. An idea was forming. They worked together, setting a clever trap. Using their knowledge of the terrain, they created a small rock slide, just enough to block the pass and force Gus to find another route. They anticipated his path, leading him toward a deep, narrow ravine concealed by a thicket of brush. As Gus pushed his way through the foliage, the ground gave way beneath him. He tumbled into the ravine, unhurt, but effectively trapped. It was a simple, elegant solution that required no conflict, only a deep understanding of the natural world. They had turned the wilderness into their ally. Before they left, Amelia lowered a rope into the ravine, securing it to a sturdy pine tree. "He will be able to climb out once we are long gone," she said, her voice firm. "We are not like them." This act of mercy was a testament to their character, a clear line drawn between their methods and the cruelty of their enemy. The small victory solidified their partnership, a silent acknowledgement of the trust they placed in each other. They moved on, their steps lighter, their resolve stronger than ever. They were not just two people on a rescue mission. They were a team, united by a common purpose and a growing love. Higgins' ranch was even more formidable than they had imagined. It was a sprawling compound nestled in a valley, surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards, who moved with a cold, professional efficiency. The main house stood like a monument to greed, its windows watching the valley like malevolent eyes. A direct assault was out of the question. They watched from a hidden ridge for 2 days, studying the patterns of the guards, the layout of the buildings, searching for any weakness in the fortress. Hope began to dwindle as the true scale of their challenge became apparent. Just as despair began to set in, fate offered them an unexpected lifeline. A man rode out from the ranch, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He stopped his horse by a stream to drink, his face a mask of misery. Nocona recognized him from a distance. It was Mr. Peterson, Higgins' bookkeeper, a man known for his timid nature. Acting on a hunch, Amelia approached him alone, her rifle left behind as a sign of peace. She spoke to him not with threats, but with empathy, sensing the deep well of fear and resentment he held for his employer. Her instincts were correct. Mr. Peterson was a broken man, trapped in a life of servitude to a tyrant. He had witnessed Higgins's cruelty firsthand, especially toward the little girl Lily, whom he treated as little more than a servant. The accountant's conscience was a heavy burden. Amelia's words, her story of her brother and his child, struck a chord within him. He saw a chance for redemption, a way to escape the prison of his own making. In exchange for their help in getting away, he agreed to become their inside man. His fear was still present, but it was now overshadowed by a newfound courage. The next day, they met in secret. Peterson provided them with invaluable intelligence. He drew them a detailed map of the ranch, marking the location of Lily's room and the guards, patrol routes. But his most crucial piece of information was the existence of a secret tunnel, an old smuggler's route that ran from the cellar of the main house to the banks of the nearby river. It was their way in, and their way out. As he handed her the map, Amelia saw a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. They now had a fighting chance, a plan that could actually work. They chose their moment carefully, waiting for a night when the sky was dark and a storm was brewing on the horizon. The wind howled through the valley, masking their approach as they made their way to the riverbank, where the secret tunnel emerged. As planned, Mr. Peterson had left the cellar door unlocked. While Amelia and the accountant slipped into the dark, damp tunnel, Nocona moved toward the stables. He was the diversion, the ghost in the storm that would draw the attention of the guards and create the chaos they needed to succeed. The air crackled with tension and the promise of rain. Inside the house, the atmosphere was oppressive. Amelia and Peterson moved through the silent corridors like shadows, their hearts pounding with every creak of the floorboards. They found Lily in a small, sparse room in the attic, a tiny figure huddled on a small bed. The girl was frightened, her eyes wide with apprehension. But then Amelia held out the small wooden falcon amulet. Lily's eyes lit up with recognition. It was the toy her father had carved for her, a symbol of his love. In that instant, the girl knew she could trust this stranger. She took Amelia's hand without a word. Just as they reached the cellar, a sudden commotion erupted from outside. Shouts and the sound of panicked horses filled the air. Nocona had done his part. He had released the horses from the stable, sending them galloping into the night and drawing the guards away from the house. It was the perfect diversion. As Higgins and his men scrambled to deal with the chaos, Amelia, Lily, and Peterson slipped back into the tunnel, the sounds of the alarm fading behind them. They had done it. They were out. The taste of freedom was sweet on their lips. They emerged from the tunnel into the raging storm. Rain lashed down, and thunder rolled across the valley. Nocona was waiting for them on the riverbank, with a small boat he had hidden earlier. As they pushed off into the churning water, they saw the lights of the ranch behind them, a beacon of their victory. Higgins stood on the riverbank, a furious, powerless figure screaming into the wind, his prize snatched from right under his nose. He had been defeated not by force, but by intelligence, courage, and the unbreakable bond of family. They had won. They traveled downriver through the night, the storm their shield, washing away their tracks and hiding them from any pursuit. As the sun rose, casting a golden glow on the water, they left the boat and continued on foot, taking the mountain trails back home. Mr. Peterson, true to his word, had brought with him Higgins's ledger, a detailed record of his illegal dealings, stolen claims, and extorted funds. At the first major town, he handed the book over to the federal marshal. With irrefutable proof in hand, the law moved swiftly. Higgins's empire of greed crumbled into dust. Back at the cabin, the small wooden structure that was once a symbol of Amelia's solitude became a home filled with warmth and laughter. Lily, a quiet and resilient child, slowly began to open up, her father's spirit shining through her bright, curious eyes. The three of them settled into a new rhythm of life. They planted a small garden together, a symbol of their new beginning. The cabin was no longer a place of hiding, but a sanctuary of healing and hope. The ghosts of the past were finally laid to rest, replaced by the promise of a shared future. The bond between Amelia and Nocona deepened into a profound and lasting love. It was a love forged in hardship and sealed by a shared commitment to protecting their small family. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of purple and gold, Nocona gave her a gift. It was a necklace he had crafted himself from polished river stones and a single perfectly formed eagle feather. It was a symbol of his people, a token of his respect and devotion. No words were needed. Their hearts spoke the same language. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, he took her hand, his touch both gentle and strong. They had faced down death and despair, and had emerged stronger, their lives forever intertwined. Lily slept peacefully inside, safe and loved. The mountains stood silent watch around them. In the quiet of the wilderness they had found not gold or revenge, but something far more precious, a family. Their story was not one of an ending, but of a true beginning, a testament to the idea that even in the harshest of lands, love could find a way to bloom.